Welcome to Whispers of Horror Stories, where every whisper hides a true nightmare. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and let the horror begin. I've never been the kind of person who scares easily. Ghost stories, urban legends, all of that. It never got to me. I always laughed them off, thinking people just love to exaggerate. But that changed the night I moved into my new apartment. It was small, quiet, and honestly kind of perfect. 2 rooms, a tiny living space, and nothing around but silence. From the first night, though, there was something strange I couldn't quite put my finger on. I told myself it was just because I wasn't used to the place yet. The first couple of nights passed uneventfully, but even then, I remember waking up at odd hours, always around 3 a.m., and always with the same uneasy feeling, like I wasn't alone. My rational side argued it was the stress of moving, but in the back of my mind, I knew something wasn't right. By the 5th night, everything shifted. I was sitting on my bed reading a book before sleeping. The clock on my phone said 1:30 a.m. when I first heard it. At first it was so faint I thought it was traffic outside or maybe the neighbors downstairs. A kind of whisper, low and hurried. But the more I listened, the more I realized it wasn't coming from outside the room. The whispers were coming from under my bed. I froze. My heart started pounding so hard, it drowned out the sound for a moment. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself it could be pipes or maybe the air vents. But deep down, I knew. There was no vent under my bed. Gathering every bit of courage I had, I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. I leaned down slowly, forcing myself to look. That's when I saw them. Eyes. 2 human eyes staring back at me from the darkness. They gleamed in the beam of my flashlight, wide and unblinking, locked straight on mine. The whispering stopped instantly. And then it smiled. Whatever, it was under there, stretched its lips into a grin that was too long, too cold, too wrong. I jerked back so fast I nearly fell, stumbling toward the bedroom door. My chest was tight, like my heart was trying to break out. I don't even remember crossing the room, but in a second, I was out in the hallway, gripping the wall to keep from collapsing. I stood there, gasping, for what felt like forever. Finally, shaking all over, I forced myself to turn the bedroom light on. I grabbed a metal rod from the kitchen and went back in. The room was empty. The space under the bed was bare. No eyes, no face, nothing at all. I tried convincing myself it was a waking nightmare, maybe sleep paralysis mixed with stress. But the next night proved otherwise. This time, I didn't go into the bedroom. I stayed in the living room with all the lights on, telling myself I'd be fine. Around 2 a.m., I heard it again, the whispers. But now, they weren't confined to the bedroom. They were in the hallway, closer, clearer. It sounded like 2 voices, overlapping, muttering things I couldn't understand, a language I'd never heard before. My skin broke out in goosebumps, and I swear, for a split second, the shadows along the hallway wall shifted, like something was crawling just out of sight. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep the next either. By the 7th night, I was exhausted, mentally and physically. I thought maybe I could end it if I just confronted whatever was happening. I left the bedroom door wide open, sat on the couch, and waited. Around 3 a.m., the whispers came, louder this time, insistent. They grew clearer until I heard one distinct phrase repeated again and again. Look under. Look under. I don't know what came over me, but I stood up and walked into the bedroom, phone flashlight trembling in my hand. I dropped to my knees and pointed the beam beneath the bed. Nothing, just dust and empty floorboards. But when I stood up, someone whispered directly into my ear. Too late. I spun around, but no one was there. My entire body went cold. My stomach twisted. I grabbed my keys and bolted out of the apartment. I didn't return until morning. Since then, I haven't slept in that bedroom again. I lock the door and crash on the couch in the living room instead. But sometimes, even from there, I swear I can hear it. The faint whispering, drifting down the hallway toward me. And I know I'm not imagining it. There's someone living in this apartment with me. Someone who waits in the dark, just out of sight. Someone still under the bed. I used to think the phrase, the witching hour, was just something people said to scare each other. Midnight, 3 a.m., whatever. It was nothing more than the middle of the night. But I don't think that way anymore. Not since the night I got my first visit. It was winter when it started. The kind of cold that settles into the bones of your house and makes every floorboard creak like it's crying under the weight. I had just moved into a small rented home on the edge of town. There wasn't much. One bedroom, an old living room, and a kitchen that smelled faintly of mildew no matter how many times I scrubbed. But the rent was cheap, and I was desperate. The first week was uneventful. I went to work, came home, cooked, and tried to sleep. But the sleep never came easily. Every night, right after midnight, I would wake up suddenly. No dreams, no nightmares, just awake, as if someone had shaken me. At first I thought it was just stress, but then I began to notice the sounds, the tapping. At exactly 12:15 a.m., every single night, there would be 3 knocks at my front door. Not loud, not frantic, just 3 slow, deliberate knocks. The first time I froze in bed, straining to listen. My neighborhood was quiet, no traffic at that hour, no kids running around. I told myself maybe it was a branch hitting the door. But the next night, it happened again. 3 knocks, same time, same rhythm. On the 3rd night, I finally got up the nerve to check. Heart pounding, I crept through the dark house and stood by the door. I didn't open it. I just peered through the peephole. No one was there. The street was empty, the yard still, not even a stray dog in sight. I locked the door tighter and went back to bed, trying to convince myself it was my imagination. But the knocks kept coming. By the 5th night, I was too scared to even check. I lay in bed with the blanket pulled to my chin, every muscle tense, waiting for the knocks, and they always came. 12:15 sharp, 3 of them echoing through the silence of the house. What made it worse was what came after. On the 7th night, I realized it wasn't just knocking. After the knocks, there was a pause, and then breathing. Slow, deep breaths, right on the other side of the door. I could hear it so clearly, like whoever it was pressed their face against the wood and just waited. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. Eventually, after what felt like hours, the breathing stopped, but I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. It didn't stop there. A week later, the knocks changed. Instead of at the front door, they came at my bedroom window. 3 slow taps on the glass, right by my headboard. I jumped out of bed, flipped the light on, and yanked the curtains open. Nothing. Just the yard, still and quiet. The branches unmoving in the frozen air. That night, I didn't sleep at all. The visits became routine. Midnight would come, and then the knocks, sometimes at the door, sometimes at the windows. Always 3. Always slow. Always deliberate. I started leaving lights on, thinking maybe it would scare them off. It didn't. If anything, it made it worse. Because one night, as I sat on the couch clutching a kitchen knife, I saw the shadow. Through the thin curtains, a figure passed by my living room window. Tall, thin, moving slowly, as if it knew I was watching. I froze, too afraid to even breathe. The shadow stopped, and for the longest time, it just stood there, inches away from me, separated only by the curtain and the glass. And then, with the same calm rhythm, came 3 knocks, right against the window. I didn't sleep for 3 days after that. But exhaustion has a way of forcing you to let your guard down. Eventually, I passed out on the couch, clutching the knife like a lifeline. That's when the worst thing happened. I woke at 12:15 a.m. to the sound of the knocks. Only this time, they weren't at the door. They weren't at the window. They were inside the house. 3 slow knocks on my bedroom door. I froze. The knife nearly slipped from my hand. My throat was so tight, I couldn't even swallow. I didn't dare move. The knocking didn't come again, but I could hear footsteps on the carpet. Slow, barefoot, coming closer. I did the only thing I could think of. I turned on my phone camera and held it up, pointing at the hallway. The screen was dark, nothing there. But the sound of footsteps kept getting closer, like invisible weight pressing into the floor. Then my phone froze. The screen flickered, glitched, and for a single frame, I swear I saw a shape. Tall, thin, its head tilted at an impossible angle. And then it was gone. I ran. I didn't even bother with my shoes. I bolted out the front door into the freezing air and didn't stop until I was 3 blocks away. I called a friend, babbling, crying, begging them to let me stay. When I came back the next morning with him, the house was silent. No sign of forced entry, no footprints, no nothing. But the bedroom door. The broken clock. Expanded version. On February 14th, 2011, I moved into a small apartment in Cleveland, Ohio, after a bad breakup. I needed a new start, something cheap, something quiet. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a red brick building that leaned slightly to one side, as if it was tired of standing. The rent was low, and I didn't ask too many questions. The landlord, Mr. Daniels, was in his late 60s, with gray hair that never seemed combed and a constant smell of tobacco. When I signed the lease, he gave me one piece of advice. Don't worry about noises at night. The walls are thin. It didn't seem like much at the time, but those words would haunt me later. The apartment itself was small and a little run down. The floors creaked with every step. The kitchen smelled faintly of mold, and the wallpaper in the hallway was peeling at the corners. But what caught my attention the first time I walked in was the grandfather clock standing in the living room. It was tall, about 7 feet, and looked ancient. The glass over the clock face was cracked, the brass pendulum was tarnished, and the hands were frozen at 3:15. I thought it was decorative, maybe left behind by a previous tenant. I tried to move it once, but it was far too heavy, as if it were bolted to the floor. When I asked Mr. Daniels about it, he shrugged. Been there longer than I have. Don't mess with it. Best to leave it alone. At first, I didn't think much of it. I was busy with unpacking, working long hours and trying to forget the relationship I had just left behind. But by the 3rd night, something strange happened. At exactly 3:15 a.m., I woke up. Not from a nightmare, not from noise, just awake. Then I heard it, ticking, slow, steady, coming from the living room. I froze in bed, telling myself it was impossible. The clock was broken, but the sound didn't stop. Finally, I gathered the courage to step into the living room. Sure enough, the pendulum was swinging. The hands twitched forward until they stopped again, frozen once more at 3:15. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day, I mentioned it to my neighbor across the hall, Mrs. Carter, an older woman who always wore the same green sweater. When I asked her about the clock, her expression hardened. "That thing's still there?" she muttered. Then she shook her head. "Just don't let it bother you." She shut the door before I could ask anything else. That night, it happened again. 3:15 a.m., the ticking, the frozen hands. By February 17th, I was paranoid. I called my friend Laura and asked her to stay over. She thought I was overreacting, but she came anyway. We made coffee, stayed up, and waited. At exactly 3:15, the ticking started. Laura's smile disappeared. "It's moving," she whispered. We both watched as the hands twitched, clicked, and froze again at 3:15. Laura swore she heard a whisper under the ticking. I didn't, but I felt something, like the air in the room had grown heavy, pressing against my chest. From then on, things escalated. Some nights the clock chimed, 3 soft, echoing tones that seemed to shake the walls. Other nights, I heard knocking from inside the wooden case, as if something was trapped inside. On February 22nd, I finally opened it. My hands trembled as I pulled the door open. The pendulum swung silently. No gears turned, no ticking, just emptiness. But when I touched the pendulum, it stopped instantly, freezing mid-swing. That night, I had the most terrifying dream of my life. I saw a man, gaunt, hollow-eyed, his skin gray and sagging, standing in the corner of my bedroom. He leaned closer, whispering words I couldn't understand. When I woke, the clock was chiming 3 times, 1 for each minute past 3:15. I needed answers. The next morning, I went to the public library and searched the building's address in the newspaper archives. What I found chilled me. In 1974, a tenant named Richard Holden was found dead in the very same apartment, slumped in a chair in front of the clock. The coroner listed the cause as heart failure, but witnesses claimed his face was frozen in terror. The article mentioned something else. When the body was discovered, the clock was stopped at 3:15. When I showed Laura the article, she begged me to move out. But part of me wanted to know the truth. On February 28th, I decided to record it. I set up a camera facing the clock and stayed awake on the couch. At 3:15, the ticking started. The camera captured the pendulum swinging, but something else too. For a brief moment, the reflection in the cracked glass showed a figure standing behind me, even though I was alone. On March 1st, it all came to a breaking point. I woke again at 3:15, but this time, the hands didn't stop. They began moving, slowly at first, then faster, spinning wildly. The pendulum swung so hard the whole clock rattled, and then, abruptly, the hands stopped at 7:46. I froze. That was the exact time my grandmother had died. 2 years. You've just heard another tale from Whispers of Horror Stories. If you enjoyed this chilling story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Remember, not all whispers should be heard.